Let's look at some of the key texts. Leviticus chapter 18, verse 22. Some people think they quote this and that ends the subject, but there are many objections that are raised. Leviticus 18:22 says that a man shall not lie with another man the way a man lies with a woman, which would obviously refer to sexual conduct and in particular penetration. You say, well, there it is. It's an abomination. Well, if I had $1 for every time I was asked this question, I would actually be a rich man. Well, do you eat shellfish? Well, actually, no. Actually, I don't. Never been into shellfish. But the objection is supposed to be the end-all objection. In other words, there are plenty of Levitical laws that you don't live by today. There are laws of ritual purity that you don't live by today, and most of you don't live by the dietary laws, or many of you don't live by the dietary laws of Leviticus 11 and Deuteronomy 14. So it's completely hypocritical for you to pick this part of the law and ignore the other parts. Do you stone disobedient, rebellious children? Do you put adulterers to death? Do you burn a witch? Do you do any of these things? How dare you just pull this verse out? We're not just pulling it out. Very simple principle. There are laws that God gave to Israel to keep them separate from the nations, such as the dietary laws. And that's a big one. Think of all the time you spend meeting people, building relationships around meals. If you can't eat together, it really helps keep you separate. And every day with food, you're remembering that you're a separated people. So there are certain laws God gave to Israel to keep them separate from the nations. So when you get to, say, Leviticus 11, God says about certain foods, these will be detestable to you. In other words, I'm giving this to you, but he never gave it to all the nations. There are other laws that God gave Israel that are based on universal moral principles. Don't murder is a universal moral principle. It's established in Genesis, the 9th chapter, after the flood, for the entire human race. If you read Amos 1 and the beginning of chapter 2, God brings judgments on the nations surrounding Israel and Judah. And he judges them for ungodly acts against each other. He doesn't judge them for dietary laws because he never gave them the dietary laws. He judges them for rape and injustice and covenant breaking. So there's some laws that God gave to Israel that were to keep them separate from the nations. There are other laws that God gave that were universal laws for all people. You say, but who in the world can sort that out? It's not difficult. Here's how you sort it out. Does God speak of the law for all people? If he does, it's for everybody. Or is it repeated in the prophets and reiterated in the New Testament? If so, it's for everyone. Leviticus 18 contains laws that are universal moral principles. How do I know it? Start in verse 1. The Lord said to Moses, speak to the Israelites and say to them, I am the Lord your God. You must not do as they do in Egypt where you used to live. You must not do as they did do in the land of Canaan where I'm bringing you. Do not follow their practices. So he's saying, don't do what the nations do. You say, yeah, that just means the separation law. This is just for Israel. No. We get to the end of the chapter. Most of it deals with incest. It also has laws against bestiality, against adultery. Get to the end of the chapter, verse 24. Do not defile yourselves in any of these ways, because this is how the nations that I'm going to drive out before you became defiled. In other words, this was sin for the pagan nations to do it. This was sin for the Egyptians and Canaanites. Simple interpretive principle. If it's sin for pagans, it's sin for everybody.